Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to show you how to change a turbocharger on your 4-cylinder F30 BMW. To start with, we're going to unclip this line out of the intake silencer and we'll disconnect this mass airflow connector. There's a hose clamp over here. And if you guys weren't aware, I bought this car for $3,500 because it supposedly had a bad engine. We've since determined that the engine is fine, but there's a rattle sound that comes when the car gets a bit of heat into it, which sounds like a wastegate. When the car sits overnight for a long period of time, there's a plume of smoke that comes out. There's an updated turbo feed line that could fix that, but really it could also be a bad turbo, especially since we have wastegate noise. So once we remove this clamp, lift up on this, and it should pull out of there. So on the cover, there's a couple of vacuum lines that you're going to want to remove before you lift up on it, like so. Just pull it forward. This line is going to have to come out. So you want to squeeze on the side and rock it down. You're going to remove this electrical connector off of here. And then you want to squeeze on this. Just take that out as such. So you want to take this piece off. You got to disconnect this hose from here. Pull that out. Get this line out of the way, squeeze on the sides and push down. Like so. You can unclip it. So at the bottom of that pipe there was a 10 mil. As you can see, it just goes right there. Putting a pick tool on the charge pipe clamps. So there's just a push clamp on there. You just pop it up and you can pop that out. So plenty of room to get that charge pipe off. You just gotta release these two metal clips on the side, they pull up. So now I'm gonna get the car jacked up so I can take the under tray off and release the bolt for the down pipe that goes to the exhaust. See if we can push it back far enough. All right, I gotta remove this under tray. Let me get this cover out of the way. This is a deep 13. I'm undoing this bracket for the exhaust. My turbo install kit comes with a new clamp there. I'm going after these 13s right here. And we got a 13 right here as well. This bracket has to come out, so we're going after the two E12s here. It'll be hard to make out on camera, but there's one up here. These are E10s, I'm gonna release them. So doing that theoretically gives you just enough slack to get this away. Now we should be able to release the V-band for the downpipe and get it out of the car while not removing the entire exhaust, which is technically skipping a step if you're following the official instructions. So I'm thinking I should just remove that O2 sensor rather than try to unroute all the wiring to get it unplugged. And then the 13 that holds the V-band for the downpipe is right there. I used my O2 sensor tool to get that out. That's the downpipe removed, exhaust stayed in place. So the instructions call for the removal of that bracket up in there. This bracket has to come out. So this is what I was anticipating, the wastegate. Tons of rattle sound, it's loose. So even if we fix the smoke on startup, this is an older turbo, so chances are it would have been worn out anyway. So it may still have smoked even after replacing the line with the check valve. But if you notice right here, tons of play on that wastegate. So when you take that wear plus the smoke that happens on startup, that's how you can determine that the turbo is pretty much shot. And that's why they thought the engine was bad on this car. We're gonna drain the engine coolant and the engine oil now. The oil drain bolt is a 10 mil Allen. So if you look at this car, it lived its whole life in Texas, but it's got some surface rust here and there. And you know that has to do with the fact that it lived right beside the Gulf of Mexico, a stone's throw away, literally on the Gulf of Mexico. So you have sea breeze and whatnot that could have contributed toward light surface rust. Not that bad, but it's not like my car that lived in Houston, even though I got this from 3 hours away from my house. So I'm following the official instructions, which would involve removing the turbo from the top of the car and not from the bottom. So that coolant hose has to come out. I believe both of them will have to come out. And I want to change the coolant anyway because I don't really know how this car was maintained before I got it. So I'm going to take out that coolant hose from the radiator and from the top of the thermostat housing, and then the other one that's in the way. So we'll be able to get the turbo out from here. So I'm going to go after that. Getting the turbocharger ready, I gotta pull this vacuum line off the wastegate. And there's an electrical connector right here. I believe it's for a blow-off valve. The shield has to come out of the way. E10s hold it on. There's just 3 E10s that hold that in place. The job calls for the removal of the wastegate to be able to get the clearance to get it out from the top. So it's not very hard to do, and this has to be transferred over to the new turbo anyway. So one of the criteria is to remove the wastegate arm from the exhaust housing. So I'm going to attempt that now from below with a pick tool, and we'll see if I'm successful. All right, there's that clip removed. So the wastegate actuator is held on by 2 T45 bolts. That's what they look like. That actually is a good idea, I believe, because sure it'll help you with maneuvering out, but also getting to the coolant drain lines and feed lines, etc. So we'll tackle those from below now. Now there's a bracket at the bottom of the turbo here. There's 2 Torx screws and one over here. I gotta slacken this and loosen that all the way. These are T40s. Going after the turbo feed line on the block. Should be able to see where I'm putting my ratchet. It's a T30. I'm gonna go after this from the top, but there's a T30 here that holds it on the 2 coolant feed lines. I'm going after this now. It's an E8 for the turbo drain line. Let this line just hang out down here. It's out of the way. And I'm using an 11 mil deep to go after the turbo flange bolts. All right, now I'm gonna try to pull it up and out of the way. As you saw, we got it out from the top following the book. Taking out the T30 that holds the coolant lines to the block because we need to pull them off to change O-ring. So a huge shout out to a viewer named Keegan Curry. He sent this turbo in. It's only got 40,000 miles on it, so the wastegate is completely tight and rigid. No wear on it, really. It's gonna be a perfect candidate to fix this car up. So really want to give a special thanks to Keegan Curry. He was cool with me saying his name. I'm gonna put a link to his Instagram in the description for you guys to give him a follow. He does car content. Show him some support for supporting the channel. We're gonna get this converted to a pneumatic wastegate now by pulling off the electronic wastegate. 2 T45s. Let's make sure this pneumatic wastegate is going to swap straight over. So this could be a really bad thing or it could be a good thing. The hole is slightly larger on the electronic wastegate, but if you look at this hole carefully, it's slightly elongated out of round just due to age and wear. So if we were to drill a hole that size to make it match, then we should be in good shape in terms of making that a perfect circle again. But let me look into it a little bit further. So that works. You're not gonna want that to be a very tight fit. It's gotta be able to move and think about expansion with heat, how everything will expand, but that seems decent. The amount of play on the rod is very limited now. So that would be converting it from electronic to pneumatic, but there may be some surprises. I'm trying to make this work based on it being a donation, some small differences, but otherwise the wastegate position seems to be an adjustment as is, just bolted up. This fits on there, the stock clip works. So I think we're good. So I'll move on now with prepping the turbo. So let's take this turbo feed line off. Here's the updated feed line with the check valve in there to avoid oil being dumped into the turbo while it sits. You can see the difference between the two. I put some oil on the O-ring before inserting it. I'm not sure this will make a big difference, but I'm going to put some oil inside this line since it has a check valve and it will just sit in the line, just because this could be dry. Putting in new exhaust gaskets. Pulling out the drain line. I'll put the torque spec on the screen for these lines, for the bolts. All right, using a pick tool to remove the drain line O-ring. And change the O-rings for the coolant lines. I'm gonna get the coolant lines put back on the car. All right, got a fresh nut. I'm gonna bring the turbo over and get it placed onto the studs and put one screw in. All right, starting right in the middle on the top, this is number 1. I'm gonna tighten this to 13 Newton meters. Number 2 is in the bottom row, just to the left. Number 3 is to the right of the first bolt in the bottom row. Number 4 is right here, top row. Number 5 is up here. I'm gonna get number 6 from below. It's on the bottom row to the left. Number 7 is in top right up here. Number 8 is right above it. Number 9 is in the top left, and number 10 is in the bottom left. So you want to go around a couple of rounds just to make sure everything's snug after, 13 foot-pounds. I'm going to put the screw on for the 2 coolant lines from down below. Bring it over the wastegate actuator. I'm reinstalling the heat shield up here. Connecting the electrical connectors. The big one down here for the water pump. I'm gonna go underneath the car now and button up all the bolts down there. Putting the downpipe gasket in. Reinstalling the bracket up there. Just tightened up the E8 for the drain line. Tightening up the feed line now. Tightening up the T45s for the bottom turbo mount bracket. Putting over the new V-band. Tightening up the secondary O2 sensor. So I got the V-band just started so I can move this around, maneuver it to get this bracket in smoothly. So I'll tighten the V-band from above once everything is in position. Putting 6 Newton meters here. There's a V-band tightened up. I'm gonna go from above now and put in the O2 sensor and whatnot. I'm just gonna time lapse through me reassembling the front. All right, I'm going to initiate the bleed procedure now. It should be the same as on an E90 where you put your fan to the lowest position, put the heater all the way up, and floor the gas pedal for 10 seconds while the headlights are off. It should be a 12-minute procedure. All right, ready to give the car a first start with the new turbo. We may get some smoke out of the rear just because there may have been some remnants in the catalytic converter, but I'm not really expecting any. So we got zero smoke out the rear. And I've heard videos of these engines brand new, and they aren't necessarily quiet, but that sounds pretty quiet to me, right on cold start warm up. We're gonna get some smoke up at the front, of course, because I had my hands all over the manifold and my fingerprints and whatnot would have to be burnt off. But otherwise it sounds great. And if you guys were wondering, the wastegate adjustment looked to be in spec based on what I was seeing. I didn't have a vacuum gauge to be able to pull it to -6 to see if it was closing all the way, but if there's any issues with boosting, then of course I'll just adjust the wastegate. It comes off real easy, as you saw. Sounds perfect. So I'll let the car heat cycle for a bit, and then I'll put those under trays on and we'll take it for a test ride. One thing I gotta say about this car is the AC is really powerful. It's got all the torque you'd expect. And I could hear it boosting when I was just revving it up in park, so it's definitely boosting properly. Very torquey. Drives great. Engine's really quiet. What's really nuts about this car is it's purely about comfort. The steering, the seats, everything. This is just way too comfortable for it to be. Makes for a great daily driver. If you're just planning to put around town and drive normally, it's pretty good. So this makes for a really good daily driver for someone that doesn't want it to be too harsh. But it's definitely boosting well. Happy with that. Lots of torque. No codes when I push it a bit. One thing's for sure, this thing's really torquey. So my wastegate's fine, it's calibrated. It's making boost. Pulls you out of a corner, no problem. I didn't really get a lot of heat into the oil, so I'm not really revving it past 4,000, but I was looking for it to be giving me that peak torque feeling, building boost down low, and it definitely is. I know these engines aren't known for being quiet, but it's actually very quiet right now. No rattle sounds, no nothing. Sounds really healthy. So we definitely fixed the issue. Alright guys, that'll conclude this video. I wasn't able to find any other DIYs on replacing the turbo on one of these cars. So hopefully this will be helpful to the community. If this is the first video you're catching on mine, please consider subscribing. If you like the video, please give it a like so it'll rank higher. Thanks for watching.